Rev Don Lewis coming to you from the beautiful metaverse, and more specifically from beautiful Danville, Illinois, homeland of the Corellian tradition. And this is Midday with Reverend Don. Welcome. I hope you're having a lovely day today. And for my subject today, I was going to talk about the moon and some of the relevance of the moon to magic and metaphysics, as well as various other things. And of course, as you know, if you follow Midday with Reverend Don, if you type your questions or comments into whatever platform you're watching on, they'll appear here in the chat room and we can talk directly. So if there are other things you'd like to discuss, feel free to bring them up. Before we begin, I want to take a moment and thank Chris Copeland for being our guest yesterday. I hope you enjoyed that, talking about the future of Corellian publishing. And I'm sure that I will frequently have Chris back to continue that subject. And hello to Janet in the chat room. It's good to see you, Janet. Um, it There's a lot going on with the future of Corellian publishing, so watch for lots more information coming. Tonight, I will be appearing on Tarot Thursday here on Pagan World TV. And so, for those people who have been asking about readings, that's the place you can get them. Once a month, I appear on Tarot Thursday, occasionally more often, with host Reverend Mary Hawk. Um, and when I'm not there, Reverend Brian is there. So there are always people doing readings on Thursday nights. It's a lot of fun. If you haven't already watched it, I would recommend watching it tonight. And if you're looking for a reading, they will, well, we in this case will do readings for everybody who asks. And that is a fun time. And it's very interesting to see some of the things that happens. One of the things that has often caught our attention is when we both, in separate states, connected only by video, happen to pull the same cards for the same reading. And that happens more than you would imagine, certainly more than probability would suggest. And anyway, if you're looking for a reading, Tarot Thursday. And tomorrow will be a best of here on Midday with Reverend Don, and I will be back on Monday. So, getting on to the moon. The moon is very important in magic. It's important in magic through most of the world, certainly most of the backgrounds that I am familiar with. And um, there are some obvious reasons for that. Of all of the different cosmic cycles, the one that is closest to us as human is the moon. And it is right there in the nighttime sky, impossible to avoid. So, of course, from the earliest times, we've noticed it and reacted to it and seen what it does for us in our lives. And hello to Jason in the chat room. Good to see you, Jason. Um, it's generally thought that very early people looked to the moon, particularly in terms of the hunting cycle. And it was certainly one of the earliest things that we used to measure time. Hello to Renee in the chat room. Good to see you, Renee. This is one reason why the moon goddess Artemis from the Greek pantheon is also the goddess of the hunt and of animals. And it's a very old connection. The moon also is connected to natural phenomena like the tides of the ocean and also to women's monthly cycles. And all of these things made it very close to us in our lives early in our history. Today, living in cities and so forth, we undoubtedly pay less attention to it um, unless we are in metaphysics, but it still is very closely connected to our lives. Hello to Mary Palazzo in the chat room. Good to see you, Mary. And everyone, I'm sure, knows the story of how on full moon nights the ER is full of unusual cases, and the crime rate is supposedly higher than other times, which certainly metaphysically makes sense. And this is part of how that moon cycle influences us. So, what is the moon cycle? The moon cycle is the waxing moon, the full moon, the waning moon, and the dark moon. Um, Today, or tonight, is the full moon. And the full moon is the time of the highest energy of the lunar cycle. It is the time when there's the most energy to focus on manifestation. During the waning moon, you have building energy. It's a good time for manifestation. And the coming of the full moon is the best time for manifestation, at least in many cases. The waning moon is the time to release things and to let go of them. And the dark moon is perfect time for working with the most inner mysteries, shadow work, etc. The full moon, being that time of heightened energy, is the reason why we see things tend to be a little bit more extreme at that time. And sometimes in our own lives, we'll see this too, that it's during this period that the most unexpected things may happen. Um, and, that can be, of course, good or bad, depending what the unexpected things are. But it gives us the most energy to deal with them. Hello to Tom in the chat room. It's good to see you, Tom. In the countryside, in the past, the moon, the full moon especially, is right there in the sky. It's overwhelming, really, um, if you think about it. And that cycle from waxing to full to waning to dark was inescapable for people. And hello to Amethyst in the chat room. Good to see you, Amethyst. And I can say, some of you may or may not remember that I am often in the habit of walking at night. It used to be when I lived in Florida that I would go for my daily constitutional around 2 in the morning, and that made that lunar cycle very obvious. And the night of the full moon is very brightly lit. The nights of the full moon, the nights of the dark moon are very dark, and when you are out in nature, this is very obvious. And so naturally, we observe this cycle in our lives and our magic. So again, if it's the waxing moon, it's a great time to work on things for the future, to manifest things. If it's the full moon, lots of energy to direct toward what you want. If it's the waning moon, good time to release. And if it's the dark moon, it's very good for inner mysteries. But what if that isn't what you need to do at that time? Well, I've said before, we want to move in tune with the energies of the universe, but we can't always. And when the way the universe is moving is not what we need to do, we need to do what we need to do. But we need to be aware that we're moving in a different direction than the natural energy is pushing, and maybe put a little more effort in for that reason. Maybe take various precautions for that reason. When we talk about things like the lunar cycle, when we talk about the solar cycle and the wheel of the year, yes, certain things are more efficacious at certain times because the energies of the universe are already there, already promoting certain outcomes. But that doesn't mean that that's the only thing that can be done. It doesn't mean that we have to wait for that if we're not in a position to do so. And so I'm a great believer in trying to attune to those energies of the universe, and also a great believer in not being um, limited by them. I'm a great believer in not being limited by anything. Now, the moon has a variety of different metaphysical meanings depending on the cultural background that you're talking about. If you are reading tarot cards, for example, and you're reading them in a more or less traditional manner, the moon is not a particularly good card. It deals with the subconscious and often with self limitation, what I like to call crossed wires. And in that more traditional interpretation, it is not a particularly good card to draw, but in many modern decks, there is a different interpretation, more in keeping with the modern pagan view of the moon, which is very positive. So, for example, if you are reading from a traditional tarot and you are reading it as it was first used, you would say, if you drew the moon card, that it means that you have to be careful of unconscious impulses, of inner belief systems, of inner crossed wires that might cross you up, and that sort of thing, and also of your own emotions, which you might not be entirely aware of. But if you were reading, for example, the Tarot of Hecate, which I designed, the meaning of the moon is very different there, as is the picture for the card. And the moon, to my background, is a symbol of spiritual guidance and spiritual connection. And so if you were to draw the moon card from the Tarot of Hecate, it is not a warning about those things, but rather the answer to them, that you want to make a point of being connected to your spiritual guidance, that you may want to use magic to deal with the situation at hand, that you want to involve the powers the moon represents, which are the higher powers of your soul, the powers of spirit, the powers of goddess, and implement them proactively in your life. Very different way of looking at it. Um, and this is true in astrology as well. And if you were to ask me when that more negative view of the moon came into um, popularity, I'm not entirely sure um, exactly where the answer is, but it's not a inaccurate view of the moon. It's just limited. And hello to Christine in the chat room. It's good to see you, Christine. Because yes, the moon does represent your inner self, which is also your spiritual self. And so it depends entirely on whether you're looking for the strengths or the weaknesses. And it certainly can describe both in these sorts of divinations. Um, in astrology, the moon is the inner personality. And again, it deals with your emotions, your belief systems, um, sometimes your inspirations. And the moon sign in astrology is very important. In my astrology, I am a Gemini. Most people who have known me didn't really see me as a Gemini, but that's because it's not just one sign that matters, it's the entire chart. And I'm writing a book about that, Reverend Don's Book of Astrology. It will be coming soon. But to really understand, you need to look where all the planets are. My lunar sign is Aquarius, and I think I manifest a lot of that energy as well. And my ascendant is Sagittarius, which, looking at my life in retrospect, I certainly did manifest. Although, if you had asked me at any point along the way, I don't know that any of that was intentional, but Sagittarius is known for being very wide ranging in its experiences, for being very philosophical, etc. And I certainly think that I did that. I've lived in all kinds of places and traveled to all kinds of places and lived in all kinds of conditions, from small hotel rooms to large mansions. And I'm quite delighted with that, actually. It has been a wide ranging life. And I don't think I would have wanted it to be anything else. But that comes to that Sagittarius ascendant. And this is part of what astrology does for you. Now, the thing that historically tended to cause people to um, misunderstand what sign I was likely to be if they didn't know is actually the placement of Venus and Mercury, both of which are in Taurus in my chart, which does a lot to hold down those airy signs that are more prominent. And of course, Venus and Taurus are the emotions and the thoughts, and to be conjunct together um, is a pretty strong position. And Taurus is a very slow and stable sign in this context. And I'd have to say that that has fairly well described me also. But within astrology, the moon again talks about the inner self, the inner nature. And when we look at it magically, again, this is part of what we're dealing with. When we do magic, we're working with our inner self. We're working with the powers of our soul. We're working with our higher self. All of this comes under the moon. And if you look at traditional folk magic from most parts of the world, I would say, but certainly from anywhere in Europe, and I would think most of the Near East, you will see that the moon is very involved in things that people do magically. And very often, the position of the moon, the phase of the moon, is considered very important for certain workings. Now, I've asked myself over time, because a number of metaphysical traditions put a lot of emphasis on time, something I really do not, something that my family did not. Um, but in earlier times, everything moved a little slower for the most part. Even within my life, I've watched everything seem to speed up. Um, Although I'm sure that people who are my age when I was young would have said the same thing. In fact, I remember them saying basically that same thing. But if we were to look back a few hundred years, waiting for the right time might not have seemed um, quite so constraining as it would today, because it was possible that less would be happening. So I'm not one who's going to tell you you must wait for the right time when all of the astrological and um, other cosmic influences are in the right place before you do any piece of magic, because I know that you can't necessarily in today's world. Maybe once. However, again, we do want to pay some attention to these things and try to move in synchronicity with them when we can. If you're trying to manifest during the full moon, it should be easier because the energies of the full moon already are pushing in that direction. If you're trying to release, to do so during the waning moon is an ideal time because the energies of the universe, or at least of the world, are moving in that direction. And this is a way of attuning ourselves to those energies, but also using them to increase the efficacy of our work. But again, you don't have to wait for that time if your circumstances are not conducive to this. So, this is a lot of what I would say about the moon and magic. Um, I think that if you've ever gone walking under the full moon, you probably don't need anyone to tell you that it's magical. It's pretty obvious. And I can remember, I suppose this is more personal than you really need to know, but I can remember some of the wonderful things that happened during those late night walks. I can remember unexpectedly running into armadillos, which I don't think I knew that we had um, in that particular location. And the thing that surprised me about the armadillos was how playful they were. And with the full moon giving the light to see them, it was surprising. Of course, I had to see them from a distance because they're not going to let you walk up to them. And the same with possums. We saw quite a few of those at night. But the one that I will always remember, and if you've followed my social media for many years, you will have seen it at the time, was the owl. And owls are an omen. They're a major omen, actually. And they are often an omen of death, if not an omen of death, an omen of warning. Sometimes they'll have different meanings, especially if you have a different personal meaning connected with it. Um, but usually that's what they represent. And one night I'm walking home and there's an owl sitting on the fence looking at me, watching me as I walk by. I have never seen anything like that before or since. And it did turn out to be um, an omen of death that was averted. Not mine, it was connected to my son. Um, but as it happened, we talked about this almost immediately after. And it turned out to have meaning for him. And through one thing and another, and through a little protective magic, when the situation came, and it came on the roadway, the accident that might have happened was averted, but it was also very clear when it would have been. Um, but I'll tell you, to see an owl that close, and I was within 20 feet, is a remarkable thing. And there are photos of that on my Facebook page, far, far down. Um, but yeah, I got my phone out and took a photo of that owl because I don't know that I'll ever see anything quite like that again, and it was magnificent. Um, these are some of the interesting things that you encounter, and I was thinking It was suggested to me recently to do a show on omens because there's some interesting omens coming in this new year, and I'm a great believer in the idea of omens, and an omen is something that is sent to you as a sign. Oh, and Christine says that she remembers me posting that, and it was beautiful. Yes, thank you. I'm glad you remember. It was beautiful. Um, oh, and speaking of omens, well, we'll come back to that one, but an omen is a sign from spirit. Sometimes a sign you have asked for, sometimes a sign you haven't. Shortly after the owl, there was another bird omen, a peacock, here in a residential neighborhood of Florida where no peacock should have been. I happened to look out the window and there's a peacock in the yard. And it was there for, well, it was there overnight. I don't think it was a full 24 hours, but it was there overnight. And when it left two peacock feathers behind, nothing else. We definitely took that as an omen. And um, I think I do want sometime here presently to do a show on why omens are important, how to interpret omens, and perhaps some nice examples of omens, other than the ones I've just given you, because I just gave you those. But I've observed many omens in my life, and I take them very seriously. I also, when I talk about divination, I think of it as being an organized system of omens. That in divination, you're usually drawing things randomly, just as you would for an omen. It comes to you randomly, and it brings you a message. It basically is the same process of receiving an omen systematized into a divination system. And this is, I think, a very important part of magic because it is all dependent on our connection to spirit. That spirit will talk to us through omens, whether random in our life or asked for through divination. And this is very much part of understanding what we're doing. Christine says, I keep seeing hawks. And I think he's telling me to keep my eyes open. Well, that is one of the things a hawk would tell you. Hawks have to do with having your eyes open and observing, also with having a good view of what's happening around you if you watch for it. The hawk flies high above us and it sees a great deal. So when you get a hawk omen, it's telling you that you need to pay attention to what you're seeing and to keep your eyes open. And now I will say, to be an omen, you must not be expecting it. So let's say, with the peacock omen I mentioned, if I lived next door to a peacock park, a peacock being in my yard would not be an omen. That's just part of life. Living as I did at that time in a residential neighborhood, far from any peacocks that I know of, um, it was an omen and a remarkable one. Um, and this is part of the nature of omens. And as you may know, the ancient Romans were known for reading from birds in particular. One of many things. They're also known for reading from entrails, but we don't generally do that anymore. Um, Certainly, I don't do that. But once it was a highly advanced art. And but with the Romans, the flight of birds and what kind of bird happened to be seen at a given moment was a major system of divination. And if the wrong bird appeared, that would stop you from doing whatever you were thinking. And if the right bird appeared, you would be very happy. This is one of the reasons why, starting during the Roman Empire, there came to be a custom of releasing certain birds on certain ceremonial occasions as a manufactured omen. An example of this might be releasing doves at a wedding. And is that something you can actually take as an omen since you created it? I don't know that I would. Um, but certainly it is a memorable thing. And hello to Tony in the chat room. It's good to see you, Tony. And it's so nice to see everyone here. It truly is. So these are some of the things about omens, some of the things about the moon and magic. Um, One of the things that's coming up soon is the Asian Lunar New Year, and I um, believe that's also connected to a number of interesting things in our Western astrology this year. I'm certainly expecting a change in energy, although I feel like we've already had some significant changes in energy. But I am looking forward to the Lunar New Year and to the energetic changes I think it will make. And I would recommend Lunar New Year this year will fall on February 10th. It is the year of the dragon. Um, that date is not the entire traditional festival, which I believe can be up to 15 days, but it is the actual start of the year. And um, we talk about Asian astrology at some length in the Second Degree book, and I'm a great believer in Asian astrology, even though it's very, very different from Western astrology. I myself am a rabbit, and I'm quite happy to be a rabbit. A rabbit is a good sign, and I think that that has made an knowing that sign has made some difference in how I look at myself in my life. I'm particularly a rabbit going into the woods, and it is always interesting to me to see how people look at rabbits. And perhaps sometime we'll discuss that and animal symbolism in general. I was speaking with a young lady yesterday and talking about some of the interviews we've done over the years, and I happened to bring up Ted Andrews. And if you're not familiar with Magic TV and the many interviews we've done, we did one single interview with Ted Andrews shortly before his passing. And Ted Andrews was known for writing about animal signs and the meaning of animals in visions and divination and so forth. And this is a fascinating subject. It is one that can vary somewhat by one's cultural background, but animals can very definitely play the role of regardless of what particular animals we're talking about. And it's always good, I think, to know the different meaning of the different animal signs. And with that, I see that we're coming down toward the end of our half hour. Once again, I want to let you know that I will be on Tarot Thursday this evening. Oh, and hello to Brian in the chat room. Good to see you, Brian. And I will be with Reverend Mary Hawk. And if you're looking for a reading, that is a wonderful place to get them. And Christine says, Animal Speaks is an amazing book. I refer to it often. That, of course, is a book by Ted Andrews. And yes, it is. It absolutely is. So I will see you on Tarot Thursday if you choose to come. Tomorrow will be a best of for midday broadcast. And with that, let us close with our Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, beloved ancestors, we ask you to help us to attune to the energies of the universe and to have the best effect for our lives from doing so. Help us to move in concert with the energies that are naturally flowing whenever possible, and help us to appreciate those energies as they move through us. Beloved Mother Goddess, beloved Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you with great love and thanks, and knowing you're always with us, but from respect, we thank you for your presence, and may you be blessed now and always. May you be blessed now and always, and I will see you soon.